I think it really importantly opens the door to the advancement of science through digital. Prior to the pandemic and prior to decentralized, many of our I'd say, advances using digital were largely taking paper and making them a digital process. We live in an era of exponential medicine. I think we need to challenge ourselves to think about how digital should be transforming the scientific backbone of how we do the clinical research. And I think we're starting to see new methods, new models emerge, and that is also extremely exciting. So I think decentralization is really all about people and patients and a model that really works for the entire world.
We did analyze over 90 protocols over all the therapeutic areas that AstraZeneca plays and compared to clinical validated devices. And we found that historically, 90% of that data had to be collected at the hospital site, but actually with new technologies, 70% of all that data could be collected from home. What we've seen, I think there is a number of studies that can be fully decentralized. There is a number of studies that can be hybrid. We call it hybrid. So we can reduce the number of visits to what is a standard of care. Standard of care has a number of visits depending on the disease. So it's being able to reduce to that number of visits. And what we have seen is that we can significantly improve the patient experience in the journey of a clinical trial by more than 50%. We have also seen that in programs where we can reduce the number of visits, not only obviously helps that patient and sustainability for the planet to avoid all that traveling, it can also reduce the cost of the study. So we've seen some studies that can be between 20 to 40% lower cost by making sure that, enabling that different way to do things. And decentralization can also help with accelerating the clinical trial. So only 3% of eligible patients choose to enter a clinical trial because it's just impossible to mix with your usual life of being at work in certain diseases and also to participate. So we see an increase, obviously, on participation if it's fully decentralized. Me and my family, we are currently participating on a clinical trial, but it's only because it's fully decentralized and we can do it from home.
And the way I look at it is we started to actually bring trials to patients rather than bringing patients to trials. And that's a very fundamental shift. As I look at our experience, we have seen significant reductions, and Christina talked about this earlier. We've seen significant reductions in the number of physical visits that were required, for example, because we had to go back to the bare essentials. We've seen drops of physical visits of up to 80% and used technology and remote monitoring devices, telehealth approaches to compensate for what would have otherwise been a physical visit. We have, as Christina has reported as well, seen both the satisfaction of trialists and patients go up. And most importantly, we did not see a drop in the scientific standards or quality, and that's ultimately what matters.
In COVID, we helped engage over 1 million patients. We expect that to go up to about 10 million more broadly as we engage patients directly in opportunities for clinical research. And I think the thing I'm most excited about is we've started to open up really community research sites. So we're up to about 15, we'll be at 40 by year end. Hopefully about 150 next year. And the idea is, how do you really cut that distance between home and site and provide a convenient community location for the patients to access research? So I agree, I think technology alone is going to get us a good part of the way there. What we're excited about is tech plus a near-end set of services to really give patients, consumers, the kind of choices they'd be looking for. You go upstream, we're also been focused on just increasing awareness and ease of access into a trial, right? We surveyed our own consumers, 90% wanted to hear about trials. And as we engage even that first million, almost all had never actually been reached out to before. And when you ask and when you create the right communication channels, you find really interesting insights. So diverse patients were actually more likely to want to know about COVID trials, right, than the standard population that we'd otherwise sort of sampled.
I think that one of the biggest opportunities is to really get into communities and be a trusted partner through trusted access points, such as community pharmacies, such as treating physicians. I think we need to look at where those trust points exist, and we need to be aware that people want they engage in clinical research to better their own health, and what are the trusted resources for healthcare that really at this point are not an access point for clinical research. I think that's a critical strategy. I also think we need to continue to really focus on education. We need to talk about why research matters and all of the efforts we make to ensure that it's safe. I think about, there's this incredible New England Journal of Medicine article looking at the incidence of smoking and smoking cessation. And it absolutely directly tracks to public awareness investments and why stopping smoking matters. And the things we talk about, the education campaigns, ensuring that everyone has access to the true and accurate information about clinical research and all of the things we do to make it safe and why it matters and save lives, I think is, it's not anything that any one company will own or necessarily directly profit from, but I think education is one of the most important things we can do to help solve this and to really improve diversity in clinical research.
Technology needs to serve a purpose, and the purpose at the end here is to really improve the science and to use technology to help us improve outcomes, prolong life, see patients benefit of substantially better quality of life. So we see three major opportunities as I look at our company. We see the opportunity to leverage technology, as I just said, to become better at what we do. And decentralized clinical trials are a prime example, leveraging real-world data to understand how patients do not just in a controlled clinical trial setting, but in real life is an element that is of great importance to us.
In terms of patient retention, prior to using these methodologies being, in some cases 30% lower than when we transitioned. And this was actually leading to, in some cases, patient retention rates of, north of 90%. And to me, that was one of the most powerful kind of data sets that we could look at.
The patient voice has become what it should be. It's the driver of what we do. And I think as we start to listen more and more to patients, our ability to enroll these trials is going to get easier and easier, and therefore we'll go faster and faster and diversify.
The science is the most important part of this, the science and the safety. At the same time, if we don't push ourselves to think of a better and more innovative way to do things, we'll also never actually change. But I think your point is a really great one, which is, this is not about hype, this is about people's lives and a scientific process that is critical to advancing those lives. But I think that, we still must push ourselves to serve a broader set of patients. We must evolve the endpoints. When you look at the approval of the drugs for HIV, it wasn't until we evolved the endpoint to be viral load that timeline for that drug approval went down from years to months. So the endpoints matter, but these are also areas we need to pressure test ourselves in our thinking and our methodologies.
We really looked at what does it take to not push the burden elsewhere, but to really change the dynamic and change the paradigm of how we design, build, and execute clinical trials by putting it in the digital hands of our patients around the world. And we've seen over 10,000 patients with age-related macular degeneration, so that's 65 years and older generally, people who all participated in a clinical screening program. We've seen patients switch during COVID from an on-site to a remote access and give us 90% satisfaction ratings of appreciation of the choices about how to participate. We're not saying decentralized has to be every time, but to give people those choices and allow people, as we all use different technologies in our day-to-day lives, to become more familiar with utilizing those to get better healthcare and better access.
So how do we, at a very basic level, cooperate in being able to screen patients for these trials and then develop drugs together? And, I think we're all at a certain level competitive with each other, but at the same time, we all have the same mission, which is to deliver new medicines for patients. So I think that there's a vast amount of information that's becoming available on the molecular targets that we're trying to hit, that essentially may subdivide the patient population smaller and smaller. So then it becomes more and more critical to work together to address the broadest population of patients as possible. And that's where I see both the opportunities and the challenges moving forward.
You know, I think one of the things that we, and I'm sure others on this call have done, is that we've really started to involve patients in these advocacy groups that Peter and Juan talk about in the development of our studies, right? So we actually will work with patients to share our protocols or these synopses before they actually get finalized, to understand, like, is this a study you'd want to participate in? Is this too many visits to the hospital? Is this too many biopsies or too many blood draws? Like, are you willing to volunteer for this kind of a thing, to make sure that we're not designing a clinical research program in a vacuum, and that it's amenable to the patient population that we hope to work with in the future.
mRNA, for instance, right? That's a hot topic right now for COVID, but you can also use that to induce an immune response toward cancer cells. So that's one area I think that is going to really be hot over the next few years. And the other area that I'd really like to see grow more is gene editing or gene therapies, because mostly because it's just so transformational, since it typically will cure the disease, versus having progression-free survivals for 10 months or 20 months, but it's actually repairing the gene. So those are the two areas where I'd like to see some breakthroughs, like in the next 5 to 10 years.
The use of artificial intelligence in advancing our understanding that can power some of the things that Ted was talking. I think we're just scratching the surface of that, and with all the challenges that it has to really think of how to use artificial intelligence, the power of computers today, and how it can advance the speed at which we think about things and connect the dots across multiple areas. I think that we don't even understand right now how powerful that can be, and I see that accelerating over the next 5 to 10 years too.
We launched our device without any connectivity for a patient to access it. We actually launched our portal in middle of last year. In about February of this year, we actually added in an ability for a patient to do virtual onboarding. Now, our patients who are getting a Calitrio prescription are 70 years old. And what we've seen is we actually have seen virtual onboarding take off like wildfire. So our patients are actually coming to our website, about 40% of them, and virtually onboarding with their technology. So if COVID's taught us one thing, it's that everybody now is learning how to be self-sufficient and to be connected. And so it's been a really nice sort of silver lining to learn that about ourselves and about our patients through COVID. I do think the future is doing things with electricity as a medicine, but doing it in wearable form factors.
Integrating and developing innovative care models, given the innovation that's occurred during the pandemic. So right now, we really see this opportunity, I think, to look at what is the right amount of face-to-face, in-person, virtual versus asynchronous care, and how do we develop novel models that take advantage of that improve outcomes, that get the right patient to that right care model, but also reduce overall cost to the health system.
What are you the most excited about? What gets you up in the morning to improve health for people around the world?
I would say access and outcomes.
Access to healthcare, whichever way it comes.
It's great to hear these individual stories of patient success, but you really want the population outcomes is really what springs to mind.
Yeah, a big theme for me is around the data and how we can actually use it to the better care of our patients, better information for our physicians, better costs for everybody, better access for everybody. But data is mission critical. No longer do I believe there will be anything, dumb devices anymore. I think all medical devices are going to be smart in the future.